Eros Ragel of Sorcevier claims to be descendant from Ragel, the son of the warrior angels Lejon and Mia. His destiny is one of unity, to bring the Five Isles under one religion, the true religion with Eros himself as its head. And to achieve this destiny of unity, he engulfs the Five Isles in a brutal crusade that will scar it forever. This is the backdrop of Brian Lee Durfee's The Five Warrior Angels trilogy. The books in the series are The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. Before I get into the review, let me explain how I actually do reviews. Personally, I'm not a fan of a single rating for an entire series or book. Many books and series have strengths and weaknesses that a single score doesn't properly reflect. So for my reviews, I use a 5-star rating system, with the 5 being the highest, over 6 categories. And they are plot, world building, characters, magic system, writing, and enjoyment. But before I begin, these videos do take a lot of time to put together. So if you like the video, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Category 1. The plot. 3 stars out of 5. The plot of the Five Warrior Angels series is based on religious strife that stretches across all 3 books. There are 5 main religions that compete for dominance. Up first is the Way and Truth of Lejon, which is a text centered on one's spiritual destiny, the ascension to heaven of the 5 warrior angels, and the eventual return of Lejon. There's the chivalric Illuminations, a text that details the history of warfare in Sorcevier and the belief system of worship under Ragel. Then there's the Moon Scrolls of Mia, which is a set of scripture that directly contradicts the Way and Truth of Lejon by stating that the 5 warrior angels never actually ascended after Lejon's death and will be reincarnated to prevent fiery absolution. The Book of the Betrayer reveals a different interpretation of Lejon, Mia, and Ragel, and reveals the fate of Dashiel Dougal, the assassin of the original 5 warrior angels. And finally, we have the Angel Stone Codex, which details the prophecy concerning the descendants of the 5 warrior angels and the 5 angel stones and weapons. Now, before going any further, there's a few terms that I need to explain regarding the series. First is the term warrior angels, which the series is named after. They are a group of 5 people known as the slave, the assassin, the gladiator, the princess, and the thief. Together, they wield the 5 warrior angel weapons, which are Forgetting Moon, Lonesome Crown, Afflicted Fire, Blackest Heart, and Ethic Shroud, against the last demon lords to save humanity. What happened to them after the demon lords' defeat is subject to debate across the many religions, with the Way and Truth of Lejon saying that they ascended to heaven, whereas the Moon Scrolls of Mia saying the opposite. There's also an event that's referred to as fiery absolution across all the main religions. Think of it as the end times. But what this end time entails varies across the different religions. For example, under the Way and Truth of Lejon, fire absolution will lead to the return of Lejon. However, the Moon Scrolls of Mia believes that it represents the actual ending of the world and needs to be avoided at all costs. As you can see, the various religions in this world contradict one another, which leads to the overarching plotlines of the book, which are the religious war that engulfs the 5 Isles, whether the 5 warrior angels are real and will return to play a part, and whether or not fire absolution will occur. So the general plot of the book is fine. You have competing religions that are at war with one another, which is not unfamiliar territory. The actual revelation of what fire absolution is, in theory, is interesting and unique. I just think the execution was poorly done. The revelation basically amounts to a bunch of characters in the know just telling the characters not in the know what the true nature of fire absolution is. Yeah, that didn't feel great. One thing that I will say as a strong positive for the series is that there are central plot lines running the length of the series instead of a series of throwaway plot lines. What a lot of series do, which I'm not always a fan of, is to give every book in this series a unique plot, which results in a series of multiple plots that never feel connected to one another. This can make a series feel disjointed. This series doesn't do that. All the books in this series revolves around the religious war engulfing the 5 Isles, and all the characters are wrapped into that conflict and drive this main plotline forward. I approve. Category 2. World Building. 4 stars out of 5. The world of the 5 Isles revolves around the varying religions. The Way and Truth of Lejon, the Moon Scrolls of Mia, the chivalric Illuminations, they are all competing religions with different interpretations of fire absolution and the warrior angels. It's actually well thought out, and you, as the reader, can really understand how these competing religions interact with one another in a volatile reaction. Then there are the non-human races, the Fae-like Veil, and the blood-sucking Urgle, time is actually spent fleshing out these people so that the part that they end up playing in events later on actually makes sense. Category 3. The characters. So let's get the basics out of the way and briefly go over some of the main POV characters. We have Tala Bronichel, the rebellious sister of King Jovan of Golconda. There's Jonderlin Bronichel, who is the eldest sister of King Jovan and is also known for her rebellious nature and disregard for the way and truth of Legion. There's Nael, a bastard boy from Gallows Haven, whose lineage may hold the key to the Five Isles. And then there's Ava Shea, a pretty young woman from Gallows Haven that ends up being involved in multiple love triangles throughout the series. Stefan Whalen, another boy from Gallows Havens who is a close friend of Nael. Gold Ulbrich, an opposing Knight Archaic in Ares Ragel's armies of Sozevier. Think of the Knight Archaics as the White Prince's most elite fighters. Then there's Mansell Allen, another Knight Archaic in the White Prince's armies of Sozevier, but unlike Galt, his lores are a bit more questionable as he is Windari, a people who were conquered by the White Prince. Krista Ulbrich, a Bloodwood assassin that is also the daughter of Galt Ulbrich. Lindelof Lee Graven, a cowardly teenager whose features are scarred by fire. Hugh Godwin, a bishop and follower of the Moon Scrolls of Mia. And finally, Sterling Prentice, a Daynot of Golconda and a believer in the Moon Scrolls of Mia. So what's my rating for this eclectic cast of characters? 1 goddamn star out of 5. If I had to describe my thoughts on these characters with just 2 words, I'd use wasted potential. Look, at the end of book 1, I had really high hopes for characters like Tala, Jonderlin, Lindelof, and even Galt, because the author did an amazing job challenging these characters' perceived notions and putting them in uncomfortable positions. The foundation for good character development was sitting right there. And then books 2 and 3 happened, and character development died a painful death. Let me give you a spoiler-free example. At the end of book 1, Jonderlin, in her arrogance and main character syndrome, puts herself in a situation where she is punished severely for this. Now, I thought that this would result in a character arc where she would address her flaws and grow and become someone more complete. Yeah, that didn't happen. She didn't learn anything from the events of book 1. In fact, her same arrogance that she's faced severe punishment for was the driving force for her arc in book 3. She learned nothing. And that's the problem with most of the main POV characters. They just don't learn from their mistakes, and instead they just keep making them over and over again. I swear, reading this is like bashing your head into a wall repeatedly. Then there's issues with consistency. The characters are all over the place with their logic and their drive. For instance, one of the characters makes a huge deal out of being done with fighting and wanting to go home in book 3. Then, without any real explanation, because why should the reader have an explanation, we see them in the thick of the fighting the next time we pick up their story. Like, what? Outside of Nael, I can't say I liked any of the characters here. And that hurts, because after book 1, I had really high hopes for many of them, and I really thought that it would be memorable for good reasons by the end of the series. Category 4. The magic system. 3 stars out of 5. Magic doesn't really play a part in this world. There are no spells in this world where people can cast fire and lightning. Most of the magic revolves around actually alchemy. Fire can be made using a powder called the Shroud of the Veil. There's also a green potion that can restore people back to health from being near death. Then there are blood sacrifices that allow for resurrection. How that does it though is really never fleshed out. Regarding the 5 mystical weapons of the War Angels, they're implied to have magic, and it seems to be the case as they can rend armor and be swung around as if they weigh nothing. But other times, they're just dead weight. Apparently it has something to do with confidence and belief. Overall, the magic as presented here is just fine. Category 5. The writing. 2 stars out of 5. Let me get one thing out of the way first. Durfee's prose is really good. The way he describes things is like an artist, and I've never read anything like it before, so huge props to him for that. The main issues that I have, though, is the heavy reliance on plot armor for certain characters and illogical choices. In terms of plot armor, every time a character from Gallows Havens is in trouble, you can bet that the author is going to whip out the Summon Bear Mug card to bail them out. Bear Mug is a shepherd dog from Gallows Haven, by the way. Armor basically works when the plot needs it to work and doesn't when we need to know that a character is a badass. As for choices, the characters don't always act logically. For example, there's a scene when one character apprehends another. Now, the character that is apprehended is a proven liar. But instead of killing him, and bear in mind, the apprehender had just killed some people, they don't kill the apprehended character. Instead, they make them promise to tell the truth about an event that happened in book 1. Again, the character that was apprehended is a proven liar, and his family is well loved by the king of Golconda. Why would any character in their right state of mind trust them? It's not logical. Category 6. Enjoyment. Oh boy. It's time, ladies and gents. It is time for me to finally give out my very first ever 0 stars out of goddamn 5. The exact words that came out of my mouth when I closed my Kindle after reading book 3 was, "Thank God this shit is over." I hated this series as a whole. And that's the key there. Because I won't lie, I actually liked book 1 because the framework that was being established actually appealed to me. Then book 2 happened, and things started to look a little bleak. But I was like, there's a book 3. The writer's gonna draw it all together, right? Right? Dumber words were never spoken. Book 3 in this series is Game of Thrones Season 8 levels of horror to the imagination. I swear, reading the last 300 pages of book 3 was like being stabbed in the eyes with needles. Hell, I couldn't stop laughing while I was reading it. And considering all the death and mutilation that was going on, yeah, that's not the intended reaction. But hey, I'm a simple guy. I read something stupid, I laugh. But the biggest crime this series commits against my preferences for fantasy is bringing real-world issues into it in the most ham-fisted way possible. Look, I'm not gonna lie. I don't really like seeing modern-day issues in fantasy worlds, since I like retreating into fantasy worlds to escape them. But I'm not opposed to it so long as you do it thoughtfully. So when you take something like religion and basically beat the reader over the head with it, over its lies and misogyny, without giving any credence to the basic morality structure that it provides for a lot of people, you are being bad fate. Then there's the issue of comeuppance. If you do something bad, people generally want you to get yours. It's why we have a justice system. This is a typical literary trope, and the author uses it here, but only against the male characters though. Oh yes, all those male characters that essayed female characters or treated them terribly, they got what was coming to them. And I have absolutely no problem with that. But then you have a female character that was guilty of the same thing, plus a side of torture. Nah, she doesn't need a comeuppance. She gets to walk away from everything without any serious retribution. Make that shit make sense. Then there's the issue of consistency again, because I'm gonna beat that dead horse until you can't recognize it anymore. How the hell do I just read a scene where characters can snipe fully armored knights in the slits of their helm with no problem? Then in the next, they can't hit the broadside of the barn. Yeah, the plot armor is powerful in this one. And finally, there's the portrayal of the genders as a whole. This series has got to be one of the worst portrayals of genders I have ever read. All the men in power? Yeah, they're idiots. And if they're not an idiot, then they're a coward. And if they're not an idiot or a coward, then they're a liar. And on top of all that, lots of the male characters in positions of power are sexual predators. For God's sakes, one of the male characters we're supposed to root for wants to bang the girl that reminds him of his daughter. Let that sink in. And the females are no better. They all suffer from the I don't need no man aside syndrome. They can do everything that the men can do, but much better. And of course, the only way this series knows how to portray them as strong is to give them all a sword, and with a few days or weeks of training, have them be able to kill fully trained knights who, spent years of training. Look, there are way more interesting ways to portray women in books as strong instead of just hand them a sword and say, "You go, girl." Take Cersei from A Song of Ice and Fire. She's not a warrior woman, but she grows becoming one of the most powerful women in the Seven Kingdoms by using her looks, her guile, and her deceit. There are other ways to show power than just relying on killing everything in your path. So that's my review of the Warrior Angels trilogy. I hope it helps you decide whether it's a series you want to invest in or not. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. And with that, I'll see you all in the next one.